She died at just 24 years old, hidden in a convent, having done nothing the world would call great. She never founded an order, never went to the missions, never performed public miracles in her lifetime. And yet, Pope Pius XI called her the greatest saint of modern times, and the Church declared her a doctor of the Church, one of only a handful of women ever given that title. Her name is Therese of Lisieux, the little flower, and her secret was so simple that a child can follow it, yet so powerful that it has transformed millions of souls. She called it the little way, a path to holiness not through great deeds, but through small acts of love done with great love and total trust in God, like a little child in the arms of its father. Stay with me to the end, because the little way of Therese is the most hopeful path to heaven ever written, and it is open to you exactly as you are today. This is the life of Saint Therese of Lisieux. Marie-Françoise Therese Martin was born on the 2nd of January, 1873, in Alencon, France, the youngest of 9 children, though only 5 daughters survived to adulthood. Her parents, Louis and Zélie Martin, were so holy that the Church has since canonized them too, the first married couple ever canonized together. Therese grew up in a home overflowing with faith and love. She was a lively, affectionate, sensitive child, adored by her parents and sisters. From her earliest years, she had a tender love for God and a remarkable desire to please Him. But this happy childhood would soon be marked by deep sorrow, sorrow that God would use to shape one of the greatest souls in the history of the Church. The story of Therese reminds us that holiness often grows in ordinary families, around the dinner table, in the small joys and griefs of daily life. She was not born in a palace or a monastery. She was a little French girl, and yet within her, God was preparing something extraordinary. When Therese was only 4 years old, tragedy struck. Her beloved mother, Zélie, died of breast cancer. For a sensitive child who adored her mother, the loss was devastating. Therese, once cheerful and outgoing, became timid, fearful, and prone to tears. She clung to her older sisters, especially Pauline, whom she chose as her second mother. This early wound left Therese emotionally fragile for years. We see here something important. Even the greatest saints carry wounds. Even they know grief and weakness. Therese was not a plaster statue of perfection. She was a real child who suffered a real loss and struggled with the effects for years. And yet God would use even this fragility, this littleness, as the very material of her holiness. Her path would not be one of natural strength, but of weakness, transformed by trust in God. If you feel weak, wounded, or fragile, Therese is a saint for you, because her greatness grew precisely out of her smallness. Therese's trials continued. When she was 9, her sister Pauline, the one she had chosen as her second mother, entered the Carmelite convent in Lisieux. To Therese, it felt like losing her mother all over again. The grief made her physically ill, and she suffered a strange and serious sickness that doctors could not explain or cure. She was healed only when, gazing at a statue of the Virgin Mary by her bed, she saw the statue smile at her, and in that instant she was completely cured. This experience deepened her tender devotion to Our Lady. But the seed had been planted. Therese began to feel, even as a young girl, the call to follow her sisters into Carmel, to give herself entirely to God. One by one, the people she loved most were being drawn into the cloister, and Therese's heart burned with the same desire. God was gently, through losses and longings, drawing her toward the vocation He had planned for her since before she was born. For years, Therese remained overly sensitive, crying easily and unable to master her emotions, a weakness that distressed her. Then, on Christmas night of 1886, when she was almost 14, something extraordinary happened, an event she would call her complete conversion, her Christmas grace. Returning from midnight mass, she overheard her father make a tired, slightly impatient remark about her childish ways. Normally, this would have sent her into tears. But that night, instead of weeping, Therese received a sudden, powerful grace. She conquered herself in an instant, held back her tears, and felt a strength and joy she had never known. In her own words, on that night, Jesus changed her heart, and the weakness of her childhood gave way to a new strength to forget herself and bring joy to others. From that Christmas, Therese was transformed, ready to begin the great race toward holiness. This shows us that God's grace can break in a single moment to heal what years could not, turning our deepest weakness into the doorway of His power. After her Christmas grace, Therese was consumed by one desire: to enter Carmel and give herself completely to Jesus. But there was a problem. She was only 14, far too young by the convent's rules. Most would have waited quietly. Not Therese. With astonishing boldness for a shy girl, she pursued her vocation relentlessly. She asked her father, who lovingly consented. She asked the local superior, who refused. She asked the bishop, and then, on a pilgrimage to Rome, during a public audience with Pope Leo XIII, despite being forbidden to speak, the 14-year-old Therese knelt before the Pope and begged him, "Holy Father, in honor of your Jubilee, allow me to enter Carmel at 15. She had to be carried away by the guards. Her holy boldness, born not of pride, but of burning love, eventually won out. her mission was granted, and at just 15 years old, Therese entered the Carmel of Lisieux. Her persistence teaches us that when God plants a holy desire in our hearts, we should pursue it with courage and trust, not bury it in. On the 9th of April, 1888, at 15 years of age, Therese entered the enclosed Carmelite convent of Lisieux, joining two of her sisters who were already there. She had finally reached the goal of her dreams. But the convent was no romantic paradise. It was a place of hard discipline, poverty, cold, silence, and the daily grind of community life with all its small frictions. Therese had come not for comfort, but to give herself entirely, to save souls and pray for priests. She took the religious name Sister Therese of the Child Jesus and the Holy Face. Life in Carmel was hidden and ordinary. Prayer, work, fasting, obedience. There were no dramatic adventures. And it was precisely here, in this hidden, unremarkable life, that Therese would discover and live the path that would make her a saint for the whole world. She understood that holiness is not found in extraordinary circumstances, but in doing ordinary things with extraordinary love. Life in Carmel brought Therese many hidden sufferings, the kind no one sees. There was the bitter cold she endured in silence. There were difficult, irritating sisters whose personalities grated on her. There was the monotony, the misunderstandings, the small humiliations of community life. And there was a deeper sorrow. Her beloved father, Louis, fell gravely ill, suffering a mental decline that broke Therese's heart. None of these were dramatic, public trials. They were the small, daily, hidden crosses that make up most of human life. And here is the genius of Therese. Instead of seeking great penances or extraordinary mortifications, she chose to sanctify these small, ordinary sufferings by offering each one to God with love. A cold she did not complain about, a kind word to a sister who annoyed her, a smile when she wanted to frown, a hidden act of service. She turned the unremarkable difficulties of every day into a continuous offering of love. This is the seed of her little way, and it is something every one of us can imitate, starting today. Therese longed to be a great saint, but she felt small and weak, incapable of the heroic penances of the great saints she read about. Rather than despair, she searched the scriptures for a path suited to her littleness, and she found it. She read, "Whoever is a little one, let him come to me." She understood that God does not demand great deeds, but great love and total trust. She imagined it like this. In her day, a new invention, the elevator, lifted people up without them climbing the stairs. Therese said, "I am too little to climb the rough stairway of perfection, so I will be the little one whom Jesus himself lifts up in his arms." This is the little way. to remain small, to not rely on our own strength, but to throw ourselves with complete confidence into the arms of God, like a child, and to do every small act, no matter how humble, with great love. It was a revolution in holiness, opening the path to sanctity not just for heroes, but for the weakest and smallest, for everyone. What does the little way look like in practice? It is breathtakingly simple. Therese taught that we become saints not by doing extraordinary things, but by doing ordinary things with extraordinary love. Picking up a dropped pin for love of God, smiling at the sister who irritates you most, doing your daily work, washing, sweeping, serving, as an act of love. Bearing a harsh word in silence, not seeking attention or thanks. She said, "I will let no little sacrifice pass, no look, no word. I wish to profit by the smallest actions and to do them all for love." The little way means that nothing is too small to be offered to God, and that the smallest act done with love has infinite value in His eyes. This is incredibly liberating. You do not need to be a missionary, a martyr, or a mystic to be holy. You can become a great saint right where you are, in your home, your job, your daily duties, simply by filling each small moment with love. That is the gift Therese left the world. Therese had immense desires. She wanted to be a missionary, a priest, a martyr, a doctor of the church, all at once, and it pained her that as a hidden Carmelite she could be none of these. Searching the writings of St. Paul, she read that without love all gifts are nothing, and that love is the greatest of all. And suddenly she understood her place. In a moment of profound insight, she cried out, "I understood that the Church had a heart, and that this heart was burning with love. I understood that love alone made the members of the Church act, that if love were extinguished, the apostles would no longer preach, the martyrs would refuse to shed their blood. I understood that love comprised all vocations, that love was everything. Then, in the excess of my joy, I cried, 'O Jesus, my love, my vocation, at last I have found it. My vocation is love. In the heart of the Church, my mother, I will be love.' By loving, hidden in her convent, Therese would touch the whole world. She teaches us that love is the vocation that contains and fulfills every other. Under obedience to her superior, who was also her sister, Therese began to write down the story of her life and her spiritual insights. She did it simply, humbly, never imagining it would be read by anyone beyond the convent. This manuscript became Story of a Soul, one of the most beloved spiritual books ever written. In it, Therese poured out her little way, her absolute trust in God's mercy, her love for Jesus, with a freshness and sincerity that has touched the hearts of millions. After her death, the book was published and spread across the world like wildfire, translated into dozens of languages. Through these simple pages, a hidden Carmelite who died at 24 became one of the most influential spiritual teachers in history. It is astonishing. She did nothing the world calls great, yet her little book has led countless souls to God. Story of a Soul proves that God can take the humblest offering, a young nun's honest words, and use it to set the world on fire with his love. In the last 18 months of her life, Therese entered a terrible trial that few would expect of such a loving soul, a dark night of faith. The God she loved so tenderly seemed to vanish. She was assailed by thoughts against the very existence of heaven and eternal life. The consolations of faith dried up completely, and she walked in a thick spiritual darkness. For someone who lived for the hope of heaven, this was agonizing. And yet, here Therese reached the summit of her holiness. She did not abandon her faith. She chose to believe and to love without feeling anything in return, making acts of faith in the darkness, offering her trial for unbelievers, for those who have no faith at all. She kept smiling, kept serving, while interiorly walking through the night. This is one of the most powerful lessons of her life. True faith is not a feeling. It is a choice to trust God even when He seems absent. If you ever feel that God is distant or silent, Therese walked that road before you, and she shows that faith held in the darkness is faith at its most pure and most pleasing to God. Therese contracted tuberculosis, the same disease that would consume her young body. The illness was long and painful, with fits of coughing blood, suffocation, and intense physical agony, made worse by the dark night of faith she was enduring at the same time. The medicine of that era could do little. Yet through it all, Therese offered her suffering for the salvation of souls and for priests, uniting her pain to the cross of Jesus. She refused to waste a single suffering, transforming each one into an act of love. Even in her agony, she remained gentle, grateful, and concerned for others rather than herself. She said she was not dying, she was entering into life. Her sisters, who cared for her, were astonished at her serenity. Therese teaches us the immense value of suffering offered with love. Nothing is wasted. Every pain united to Christ becomes redemptive, a prayer that saves souls. In a world that flees all suffering, she shows that even a sickbed can become an altar, and pain transformed by love a powerful force for good. As she lay dying, Therese made an astonishing promise that has comforted millions ever since. She did not say she would rest in heaven. She said, "I want to spend my heaven doing good on earth." And she added, "After my death, I will let fall a shower of roses. She believed that her mission was only beginning, that from heaven she would help souls on earth, interceding for them, drawing them to God, sending graces like a rain of roses. Far from seeing death as the end of her work, she saw it as the start of an even greater mission of love. And the promise has been kept in an extraordinary way. Since her death, countless people who have asked her intercession report receiving roses, literal flowers appearing in unexpected ways as signs, or graces and favors granted. Therese continues, just as she promised, to do good on earth from heaven. Her promise is a beautiful reminder that the saints are not distant figures of the past. They are our living friends in heaven, close to us, eager to help us, only a prayer away. On the 30th of September, 1897, after a long and painful illness, Sister Therese of the Child Jesus died at the age of 24. Her final hours were marked by intense suffering, but also by profound peace. As death approached, the darkness of her trial of faith lifted, and gazing at the crucifix, she spoke her last words. "My God, I love you." With those words, the words that summed up her entire life, she died. Her face, the sisters said, took on an expression of heavenly peace and beauty. A young woman the world had never heard of, who had spent her brief adult life hidden behind convent walls, passed quietly into eternity. By every worldly measure, her life had been small and unremarkable. But heaven measures differently. In the eyes of God, this little soul who had loved so greatly was a giant of holiness. And within just a few years, the whole world would come to know it. Her death was not an ending, but the beginning of a mission of love that continues to this very day. Almost immediately after Therese's death, the promised shower of roses began. As story of a soul spread across the world, so did reports of extraordinary favors granted through her intercession, healings, conversions, answered prayers, and the mysterious appearance of roses as signs of her presence. Soldiers in the trenches of the First World War carried her image and credited her with protection. People of every nation, rich and poor, learned and simple, found in this young French nun a powerful friend in heaven. The devotion to the little flower exploded across the globe with astonishing speed. It became clear that Therese was keeping her promise. She was spending her heaven doing good on earth. The flood of miracles and favors was so great and so well documented that the Church moved with unusual speed to recognize her sanctity. The hidden nun who had longed to save souls was now drawing them to God by the thousands, and then by the millions. Heaven had taken the smallest of flowers and made her bloom over the whole world. The recognition of Therese's holiness came with remarkable swiftness. She was canonized a saint in 1925, just 28 years after her death, by Pope Pius XI, who called her the greatest saint of modern times. She was named co-patroness of the missions, alongside the great Saint Francis Xavier, an extraordinary honor for a cloistered nun who never left her convent, because by her prayers and love she had become a missionary to the whole world. And in 1997, Pope John Paul II declared her a Doctor of the Church, one of only 4 women ever to receive that title, given for the depth and richness of her spiritual teaching, the little way. Think of the paradox. A young woman with little formal education, who did nothing the world calls great, ranked among the greatest teachers of the faith in all of history. This is the upside-down logic of the gospel, where the last are first and the humble are exalted. God lifted up his little flower and set her among the towering doctors of the church, to teach the world that love and trust are the heart of holiness. The most beautiful thing about Saint Therese is that her path is for you, exactly as you are today. You may feel too small, too weak, too sinful, too ordinary to ever be holy. That is precisely the starting point of the little way. Therese tells you, do not be discouraged by your weakness. Let it be the reason you throw yourself into God's arms. You do not need to do great things. You need only to do small things with great love. A patient word, a hidden act of service, your daily work offered to God, a difficulty borne without complaint, a prayer in the middle of a busy day. Trust God like a little child trusts its father, even when you fall, even when you feel nothing. Begin again with confidence after every failure. This is sanctity within reach of everyone, the mother at home, the worker, the student, the sick, the elderly. You do not have to climb the steep mountain of perfection by your own strength. You only have to let Jesus carry you. Start today with one small act of love. That is the whole secret of the little flower. Even before entering Carmel, as a young teenager, Therese felt a burning desire to save souls. She read in the newspaper about a hardened criminal named Pranzini, condemned to death for a triple murder, who showed no repentance and refused the sacraments. Therese was seized with compassion for this man on the brink of eternal loss. She called him her first child and threw herself into prayer and sacrifice for his conversion, begging God for just one sign that he would be saved. She trusted completely. On the day of his execution, Pranzini, who had refused everything, suddenly, at the last moment, seized the crucifix the priest offered and kissed the wounds of Christ 3 times. Therese wept with joy when she read it. God had given her the sign. This experience set her life's course. She understood that by prayer and sacrifice, even hidden in a convent, she could win souls for God across the whole world. It is a powerful lesson for us. No one is beyond the reach of grace, and our prayers for sinners, even the worst, are never wasted. We can be spiritual parents of souls we will never. One of the deepest sorrows of Therese's life was the illness of her beloved father, Louis. Not long after she entered Carmel, this gentle, devout man suffered a series of strokes and a devastating mental decline, spending his final years confused and humiliated, even confined for a time in an institution. For Therese, who adored her father and called him her king, watching his suffering and humiliation was a crucifixion. Yet she came to see it as a great grace, a share in the cross of Christ, and she offered her father's trial and her own grief for the salvation of souls. She had taken the name of the Holy Face, partly in union with the suffering, disfigured face of Jesus in his passion, and she saw her father's humiliated face reflecting that of the suffering Christ. Through this, Therese learned that love includes the cross, that the people we love most may suffer in ways that break our hearts, and that even this can be offered to God as an act of love. Her tenderness toward her suffering father reveals the depth of her own heart. Therese's full religious name was Sister Therese of the Child Jesus and of the Holy Face, and both devotions shaped her soul. The Holy Face devotion centered on the suffering, disfigured face of Jesus during his passion, the face spat upon, struck, and covered in blood, the face that, as the prophet Isaiah said, had no beauty that we should desire him. Therese was drawn to this hidden, humiliated Christ, and she found in it the model of her own hidden life, to be unknown, unnoticed, counted as nothing in the eyes of the world, just as Jesus was in his passion. She did not seek to be admired or recognized. She wanted only to console the hidden, suffering face of her beloved. This devotion fed her desire to remain little and hidden, to do good in secret, to embrace the unglamorous, unseen sacrifices of daily life. In a world obsessed with recognition and image, Therese points us to a different beauty, the hidden holiness of a soul that loves God in secret, content to be little and unknown, like the suffering face of Christ. As Therese grew in her understanding of God, she became convinced that the deepest truth about him is his merciful love. Many in her time were tempted to see God as a strict judge to be feared. Therese saw a Father overflowing with mercy, longing to pour out his love, but finding few souls willing to receive it. So she did something profound. She offered herself as a victim of Holocaust to God's merciful love, surrendering herself entirely so that his love, rejected by so many, could flood into her and through her into the world. This was not about fearing punishment. It was about receiving and returning love without limit. She trusted not in her own merits, which she considered nothing, but entirely in God's mercy. This act of oblation became central to her spirituality and to the little way, to abandon ourselves completely to God's merciful love, confident not because we are good, but because He is good.
Therese teaches us to stop being afraid of God and to throw ourselves into the ocean of His mercy, which is greater than all our sins and weaknesses combined. If there is one word that captures the spirit of Saint Therese, it is confidence. She taught again and again that what most pleases God is not our perfection, but our trust. She wrote that even if she had committed every possible sin, she would still throw herself into the arms of Jesus with total confidence, knowing His mercy. She compared herself to a little child who, after falling, runs to its father to be picked up, rather than hiding in shame. This is revolutionary for souls weighed down by guilt and fear. Therese insists, God is not waiting to condemn you. He is waiting to embrace you. Our falls, our weaknesses, even our sins, when brought to Him with trust, become occasions for His mercy to shine. What grieves God is not our littleness, but our lack of confidence in His love. She said that we can never have too much confidence in the good God who is so powerful and so merciful. If fear has kept you from God, Therese's message is liberating. Come as you are, fall into His arms, and trust without limit. That trust itself is the path to holiness. Beyond story of a soul, Therese poured out her love for God in poems, prayers, and little plays she wrote for the community's feast days. She was not a trained theologian or a polished writer, but her words have a freshness, sincerity, and depth that have made them treasures of spiritual literature. In her poems, she sang of her love for Jesus, her trust in mercy, her longing for heaven, and her desire to love God for those who do not love Him. Her writings reveal a soul on fire with love, expressed in the simple language of a young woman. This, too, is part of her lesson. We do not need to be learned or eloquent to love God or to share that love. Therese used the ordinary gifts she had, words, small talents, daily duties, and offered them all to God. Her creativity was an act of love, not a bid for admiration. She reminds us that whatever gifts we have, however modest, can become offerings of love and channels of grace when we give them to God with a sincere heart. The devotion to Saint Therese has only grown with time. In an extraordinary phenomenon, her relics have traveled to dozens of countries across the world, drawing immense crowds wherever they go, often larger than for visiting heads of state. Millions of people, of all backgrounds,
line up for hours to pray before the relics of this young Carmelite who died over a century ago.
Why such devotion to someone who lived so hidden a life? Because people sense in Therese a friend, accessible, warm, close, who understands their littleness and weakness, and who promised to help them from heaven. Her shower of roses continues. Countless favors and conversions are attributed to her intercession across the globe. She has become one of the most beloved saints in the entire Church, patroness of missions, of France, and a doctor of the Church. Yet she remains in the hearts of the faithful, simply the little flower, a tender friend in heaven. Her enduring popularity proves the power of her message, that the path of littleness and love speaks to every human heart, in every age and nation. We live in a world that worships greatness, success, recognition, and achievement. A world that can make ordinary people feel that their hidden lives have no value. Into this world, Saint Therese speaks a liberating truth. Greatness in the eyes of God is not measured by what we accomplish, but by how much love we put into the small things. This is desperately needed today. So many feel too small, too insignificant, too burdened by weakness to matter. Therese tells them, "Your hidden acts of love are seen by God and have eternal value. You can be a great saint exactly where you are." Her little way dignifies the unseen labor of mothers, the patient endurance of the sick, the faithful work of the unnoticed, the small daily kindnesses no one applauds. It tells the anxious and the guilt-ridden to trade fear for confidence in God's mercy. In an age of pride and self-reliance, she calls us back to childlike trust. The world does not need us to be spectacular. It needs us to love in the small, ordinary moments with great love. That is the message of the little flower for our time. The life of Saint Therese of Lisieux is the story of how a hidden, fragile young woman became one of the greatest saints in the history of the Church, not by doing great things, but by doing small things with great love and total trust in God. She lost her mother as a child, struggled with weakness, suffered the hidden trials of convent life, endured a dark night of faith, and died at 24, having done nothing the world would notice. And yet, through her little way, she has led millions to God, and continues, just as she promised, to spend her heaven doing good on earth, letting fall her shower of roses. Her message to you is full of hope. You do not have to be great to be holy. You only have to love in the small and ordinary moments of your life, and to trust God like a little child. Heaven is not reserved for spiritual giants. It is opened wide for the little ones who love.
If this story touched your heart, subscribe and share it so that more souls may discover the little way. And write in the comments, Saint Therese, pray for us, and let fall your roses. May the little flower